Snow cut across the trail like blades. The storm pressed against the mountain. A lone woman forced her way through the drifts. Her boots sank deep, and her breath turned white in the freezing air. The woman stumbled once, caught herself, and pushed forward. Her name was Evelyn Carter. Evelyn was 29 years old, a city woman far from the streets she knew. The narrator explained Evelyn had left the train at the wrong stop, chasing a short path back to town. The path turned into a trap. The mountain did not forgive mistakes. Evelyn Carter now fought the storm with no clear way out. Two shapes filled her sight. First, the dark cut of pine trees swaying in the wind. Second, the thin curl of smoke rising above them. Evelyn blinked, eyes burning from cold. A cabin stood beyond the trees. Relief struck her chest. Shelter meant life, or at least a chance at it. She gripped her coat and forced her legs forward. Evelyn reached the cabin steps. Her hands shook as she knocked. For 3 long seconds, nothing moved. Then the door creaked open. A man filled the frame. His shoulders blocked the firelight behind him. The narrator gave his name: Jonas Miller. Jonas was 42 years old, a mountain man, a hunter, and a man who had chosen exile. His leather coat hung torn at the arms, a scar pulled at his cheek. Jonas Miller's eyes were sharp yet tired, the eyes of one who had seen too much. Evelyn tried to speak, but only a whisper escaped. Jonas did not answer right away. His silence pressed harder than the storm. Finally, he moved aside and let her enter. The cabin door groaned against the wind as it shut. Inside, heat struck her face. Firelight flickered on log walls. Evelyn stretched her hands toward the flames. The sting of thawing skin made her gasp. Jonas Miller stood across the room, never sitting, never turning away. The narrator explained Jonas had lived alone for many years. His name carried weight in the nearby town, though most spoke it with fear. He had left after violence changed him. The scars on his hands told that story better than words. Jonas stepped closer. His voice was low, broken. "I can't control myself around you." Evelyn froze. Was it warning? Was it threat? The fire popped, but no answer came. Jonas's face gave nothing. Her fingers closed around the silver locket at her neck. The narrator explained it was her mother's gift, a piece of home she never let go. The locket glinted in the firelight, a small defense against a large unknown. Snow hammered the roof. The cabin seemed to shrink with every gust. Evelyn Carter felt the storm outside, but a greater storm brewed inside. Jonas Miller stared at her with an unreadable gaze. He slammed the door shut behind her and whispered, "You shouldn't have come here." The fire burned low. Sparks leapt, then died. Jonas Miller leaned forward, pushing another log into the flames. The wood cracked, smoke curling into the dim cabin. His silence filled the room, heavier than the storm outside. The narrator explained. Jonas Miller had once lived in the nearby town. He was known by every man there, yet no one called him friend. Years ago, anger had driven Jonas to violence. He had left with nothing but his rifle and scars. The people feared him. They whispered his name as if speaking it too loud might bring him back. Evelyn Carter sat close to the fire. Her fingers rubbed her silver locket, the small token from her mother. The narrator reminded the locket had been Evelyn's only comfort on the long trail. Evelyn tried to speak, her voice small. "Do you live here alone?" Jonas Miller did not look at her. He ran a cloth along a long rifle, slow and steady. His silence stretched. Finally, he gave one word. "Yes." Evelyn Carter tried again. "Do you ever go to town?" Jonas Miller's jaw tightened. He said nothing. The narrator explained Jonas had not set foot in town for years. To him, town meant chains, fists, and judgment. He had chosen the mountain, because the mountain asked for nothing but strength. The rifle gleamed in the firelight. Jonas Miller lifted it, showing the dark wood stock. The narrator revealed this was the same rifle he carried on the night of his exile. It was his second proof token, a reminder of both survival and violence. Evelyn Carter's eyes widened. Her city life had never brought her this close to such a weapon. Jonas Miller studied the rifle, not her. He whispered like speaking to the fire. "This is what keeps me alive." A sound cut through the wind, a sharp cry in the distance. "Evelyn, Carter flinched. Jonas Miller did not move. He only nodded toward the window. Wolves, the storm roared, shaking the shutters. Evelyn Carter pressed her locket, as if the silver could shield her from teeth. Jonas Miller kept cleaning the rifle, calm but focused. The narrator explained Jonas knew the patterns of wolves. Hunger made them reckless. Packs grew bold when storms covered their tracks. Evelyn Carter leaned closer to the window. Snow streaked past the glass. Her breath caught as another howl rose, this one closer. Jonas Miller finally lifted his head, his eyes fixed on the window. Not everything hunting you wears fur. Evelyn Carter froze. The words cut sharper than the wind. Her fingers locked around the locket. Jonas Miller's scarred hands held the rifle steady, but his voice stayed low. The howls outside grew closer, and Jonas Miller said, "Those aren't just wolves." The fire sank low, leaving only a red glow in the hearth. The wind rattled the shutters. The small cabin seemed smaller with each gust. Evelyn Carter rubbed her hands, but her eyes kept moving across the room. The narrator explained Evelyn Carter had grown up with bright lamps, polished floors, and warm kitchens. Now she sat in a room built of rough logs, cracks stuffed with moss. Smoke stained the ceiling. A pile of animal skins lay in the corner. To her, it looked more like a trap than a home. Evelyn Carter shook her head. "This isn't even a proper bed. No stove, no table. How do you live like this?" Jonas Miller, the mountain man, looked up from the fire. His face hardened. Jonas had lived inside these walls for 20 winters. His hands had cut every log. His sweat had sealed every gap. His voice struck like a hammer. "This cabin kept me alive 20 winters. Your city shoes wouldn't last a mile out there." "Evelyn." Carter flinched at his tone but pushed back. "In the city, we don't sleep on the floor like animals." Jonas Miller slammed his palm against the log wall. The cabin shook. "You call it animal. I call it survival. Out here, soft words and soft shoes get you buried in the snow." The narrator explained Jonas Miller carried deep scars from his years alone. His world was built on cold, hunger, and teeth in the dark. Evelyn Carter's world was built on markets, voices, and safe lamps. Their words struck like stones from 2 different mountains. Evelyn Carter's silver locket glinted in the firelight. She gripped it, clinging to her mother's gift as if it could shield her. Jonas Miller saw the locket and shook his head. "Pretty things don't save lives here," the fire hissed. Jonas reached to a wooden chest beside the wall. The hinges creaked. From inside he pulled a folded piece of cloth. He did not hold it gently. He threw it on the table between them. The narrator gave the truth. It was a scarf, torn and stiff, stained with blood. Jonas Miller had kept it for years. Jonas's voice was flat. "The last visitor who came through this storm wore that." Evelyn Carter froze. Her eyes locked on the dark stains. Her breath caught as if the scarf itself still carried cold. The Tiua. Narrator told of the boy who once arrived at Jonas Miller's cabin. He was a merchant's son, no older than 19. He thought the mountain was a road to fortune. Jonas warned the boy to stay inside. The boy laughed. He walked into the storm and never returned alive. Jonas had found him the next morning, frozen under a tree. The scarf was all that remained. Jonas Miller gripped the scarf tight. His knuckles whitened. The fire popped, casting red light over the bloodstains. "This is what happens to outsiders. Here." Evelyn Carter pressed her locket until her hand ached. Her eyes flicked from the scarf to Jonas Miller's scarred face. She realized the man before her was not only a shield against the storm. He was also a storm of his own. The wind screamed through the shutters. The scarf lay heavy between them, proof of death. The cabin seemed to hold its breath. Evelyn Carter shivered, not from the cold, but from the truth Jonas had thrown in her lap. Jonas Miller raised the scarf higher, the blood dark against the firelight, and said, "This is what happens to outsiders here." Dark dropped fast over the mountain. The storm howled through the trees, shaking the cabin walls. Evelyn Carter sat near the fire, clutching her silver locket. The narrator reminded that the locket was her only proof of home, a gift from her late mother. Evelyn's hands trembled as the wind pressed against the logs. A sound scraped at the door, low, sharp, a claw on wood. Evelyn Carter jerked upright. Jonas Miller, the mountain man, reached for his rifle. His eyes narrowed. He listened once, then moved to the window. Another scrape, then a growl. The wolves had found them. Jonas Miller grabbed loose boards stacked near the wall. He threw one toward Evelyn. "Hold it steady." Evelyn Carter's heart raced. Her city shoes were soaked, her arms weak, but Jonas's order cut through her fear. She pressed the board against the shutter. Jonas hammered with quick, hard strikes. Each blow shook her bones, but she refused to let go. The narrator explained Evelyn Carter was soft when she entered this cabin, yet the mountain forced strength into her hands. Her nails bent, her fingers burned, but she gripped tighter. Jonas Miller saw her jaw set with stubborn fire. Another scratch tore at the other window. Jonas Miller shoved Evelyn toward it. "Brace it." Evelyn pressed her back against the wood, pushing with her shoulders. The shutter groaned, teeth scraping just beyond. Jonas Miller fired one shot from his rifle. The crack split the night. A wolf yelped, then silence. The narrator recalled the rifle was Jonas's proof token, the weapon that had saved him through exile. Now it protected Evelyn Carter, too. Smoke from the shot drifted inside the cabin. Jonas's chest rose heavy, but his eyes stayed sharp. The wind roared harder. Evelyn Carter's breath came in gasps, but she did not break. Jonas Miller pressed another board across the door, hammer striking nails deep. Evelyn held one side. Together they sealed the cabin inch by inch. Jonas Miller gave her a quick look. His voice softened for the first time. "Maybe you can survive, after all." Evelyn Carter's grip on the locket tightened. The narrator explained her mother's gift was a symbol of her softer world, but tonight it rested against a heart growing harder. She was no longer only a visitor. She was fighting the mountain beside Jonas Miller. Then the sound changed. The growls outside faded, but the ground itself seemed to shake. Evelyn Carter stepped back from the window, eyes wide. A shadow stretched across the snow, larger than the wolves. Jonas Miller's face turned grim. The cabin wall shook. The logs groaned. Evelyn Carter whispered, "What is it?" Jonas Miller kept his rifle raised. His voice was low, steady. "That ain't a wolf." The shadow slid past the window, tall, broad, moving with slow weight. The fire snapped inside the cabin. Evelyn Carter pressed her back to the wall, the locket cold against her chest. The cabin wall shook again, and a shadow passed the window, too tall for any wolf. The cabin fell quiet. The fire burned low, the crackle fading under the roar of the storm. Evelyn Carter held her silver locket against her chest. The narrator reminded that the locket was Evelyn's last link to her mother, a fragile comfort in a place of danger. Jonas Miller, the mountain man, stood near the door with his rifle ready. His ears caught a sound beneath the storm. Not claws, not wolves. The sound was steady, heavy, boots crushing snow. Jonas Miller's face hardened. Jonas whispered, "Bandits." Evelyn Carter froze. The narrator explained that Jonas Miller knew these trails. Wolves were not the only hunters here. Men moved in the dark, men with knives, men who killed for fire and food. Jonas Miller pointed to the doorframe. Nailed above the door was a broken horseshoe. The iron was bent, cracked through the middle. The narrator revealed this proof token was Jonas Miller's warning. No man entered without risk. The bandits would see it, but they would not turn away. The cabin walls groaned. A shadow crossed the window. Then another. Evelyn Carter's breath shook. Her hands searched the counter until they found a kitchen knife. The blade was dull, the handle worn, but she clutched it like salvation. Jonas Miller cocked his rifle. The sound snapped through the cabin like thunder. His scarred hands gripped the weapon with calm strength. Evelyn Carter stepped close, her locket cold against her skin. A hand pressed against the shutter. Wood creaked under the touch. Another hand rattled the door latch. The cabin shook, as if tested by the storm itself. Jonas Miller raised his finger to his lips. "Quiet." The narrator explained Evelyn Carter had feared wolves before, but this fear was sharper. Wolves hunted because they must. Men hunted because they chose. The door latch fell silent. Snow muffled the outside. Evelyn Carter dared to hope they had passed. Then the window cracked under a strike. A face pressed. Against the glass, eyes hollow, teeth bared. Evelyn gasped. Jonas Miller swung the rifle toward the window. His finger touched the trigger. He waited for the next move. Evelyn Carter's knife trembled in her hand. Her breath came fast, fogging the air. The silence broke with a crash. The door burst open, wood splintering into the cabin. 3 men stormed. Inside. Their coats were torn, their boots caked with ice. Faces scarred, eyes cold and empty. One man held a club. Another gripped a hunting blade. The third carried nothing but hunger in his stare. The narrator re-anchored. Jonas Miller stood tall, rifle aimed, his body a shield. Evelyn Carter crouched behind him, silver locket pressed close, knife trembling in her hand. Jonas Miller's voice dropped to a growl. "Stay behind me!" The storm howled through the broken door. Firelight danced across steel and scars. Evelyn Carter's hand shook but did not let go of the knife. The 3 men stepped closer. The door burst open and Dapo. 3 men stormed inside, the cabin filled with boots and shouts. Firelight caught the scars on the intruders' faces. Evelyn Carter clutched her silver locket, the small proof token of her old life. Jonas Miller stepped forward with his rifle raised. His scarred hands gripped the weapon like it was part of his body. The first bandit lunged. Jonas Miller swung, the rifle hard. The butt cracked against the man's jaw. Blood sprayed across the firelit wall. The man dropped with a howl. Evelyn Carter gasped, but Jonas did not stop. Jonas turned fast, aiming at the second man. The second bandit slammed Jonas Miller into the wall. Logs shook, dust falling from the beams. Jonas grunted, teeth bared. The narrator explained Jonas had fought hunger, storms, and wolves, but men were different. Men wanted power. Men wanted fear. Evelyn Carter's knife trembled in her hand. The third man rushed her, his eyes locked on the locket at her throat. She lifted the blade with a scream. The dull edge slashed his arm. Blood ran down his sleeve. The man cursed and pulled back, clutching the wound. The narrator explained survival was no longer about city manners or mountain pride. Survival turned people into animals. Evelyn Carter's city fear burned into courage. Jonas Miller's exile sharpened into fury. The fight closed in. Jonas Miller drove his shoulder into the second man, slamming him across the table. Wood cracked. Firelight spilled across the rifle. The first bandit staggered back to his feet, teeth red with blood. Jonas swung again, the rifle butt smashing into ribs. Evelyn Carter pressed against the wall, knife raised, locket glinting. The wounded bandit reached for her wrist. She twisted free, the blade catching his sleeve again. Her breath came fast. Eyes wide, but she did not drop the weapon. The narrator re-anchored. Jonas Miller battled 2 men, his rifle a club, his fists raw. Evelyn Carter fought the third, her locket bouncing against her chest, a fragile symbol in a brutal room. Then, the tide shifted. The second man rolled off the table and tackled Jonas to the floor. The first joined, pressing Jonas's shoulders down. Jonas roared, swinging fists, but 2 bodies held him tight. His rifle slid across the floor. Evelyn Carter's heart slammed against her ribs. She gripped the knife tighter. The third bandit snarled, blood dripping from his arm. He shoved her back hard. Her shoulders hit the wall. The knife nearly fell, but her fingers locked tight. Jonas Miller kicked, twisting under the weight. His scarred hands clawed for his rifle, but it was too far. The bandits pressed harder, forcing him down. The fire popped, sparks flying across the floor. The narrator explained Jonas Miller fought like a beast cornered. His eyes burned, his teeth bared, but strength alone could not break 2 bodies. The wooden floor creaked under their weight. Evelyn Carter's breath came ragged as she tried to rise. The third bandit raised his knife. He leaned over Jonas Miller, steel flashing in the firelight. Jonas's chest heaved as the blade hovered above his heart. Evelyn Carter's scream ripped through the cabin. The bandit raised his knife, and Evelyn screamed Jonas's name. The cabin floor shook with the struggle. Jonas Miller lay pinned, 2 bandits pressing him down. His scarred hands clawed at the boards, his rifle out of reach. Evelyn Carter gripped her silver locket with one hand. Her other hand reached for the rifle lying near the fire. The narrator reminded the locket was Evelyn Carter's proof token from her mother, a symbol of her old life. Tonight, The locket pressed against her chest as she chose between fear and courage. Evelyn Carter's fingers closed around Jonas Miller's rifle. The weight shocked her arms, but she lifted it. The third bandit saw her. Blood dripped from his cut arm where Evelyn Carter had stabbed him earlier. He grinned, cruel and sure. "You won't pull the trigger." Evelyn Carter's hands shook. The rifle felt heavy, almost alive. Jonas Miller struggled under the weight of the men. His eyes met Evelyn Carter's. They burned with both rage and plea. The narrator explained the choice was not only life or death, it was mercy against revenge. Would Evelyn Carter become what the mountain demanded, or hold to what the city taught her? The bandit laughed. "You're soft. You'll watch him die." Evelyn Carter screamed and pulled the trigger. The shot blasted into the ceiling. Wood splintered and snow poured through the crack in a white cascade. The bandits froze. The echo thundered in the small cabin. Jonas Miller used the moment. He drove his knee into one man's chest. He rolled, twisting out from under their grip. His scarred hands grabbed a chair and smashed it against the second bandit's back. The man crumpled to the floor. Evelyn Carter kept the rifle aimed, her arms stiff, her breath ragged. Snowflakes drifted down through the broken roof, melting in the firelight. The wounded bandit cursed, but his eyes flicked to the hole above them. The storm's howl poured into the room, louder than ever. The narrator explained mercy had turned the fight. Evelyn Carter had not spilled blood, yet the power of the rifle and the sound of her choice drove fear deeper than death. The three bandits backed toward the door. Their faces were pale in the firelight. One spat on the floor, but his boots slid, in the snow rushing inside. Without another word, they fled into the storm. Silence fell hard. Only the wind screamed through the roof hole. Evelyn Carter's arms dropped. The rifle clattered to the floor. Her chest heaved as she pressed the locket once more. Jonas Miller rose slow, his breath heavy. He stepped to her, his scarred hand reaching for hers. His voice dropped low. "You saved me," the narrator reminded. The silver locket had been Evelyn Carter's shield, but tonight her choice was her true weapon. Mercy had won, though danger still waited in the storm. The fire burned low again, red sparks flashing in the dark. The rifle lay across the floor, snow melting around it. Evelyn Carter stood tall, the locket glowing in the faint light. Jonas Miller touched her hand once more and whispered, "You saved me." The fire crackled in the cabin. Shadows stretched across the log walls. Snow pressed against the roof, a steady weight. Evelyn Carter sat close to the flames, her silver locket resting against her chest. Jonas Miller sat across from her, his scarred hands resting on the rifle. The narrator explained Jonas Miller had carried that rifle since the night he left town. The rifle was more than a weapon. It was a reminder of rage, of blood, of the night his name was spoken with fear. Jonas Miller's face hardened as the firelight touched the scars on his cheek. Evelyn Carter broke the silence. "You said once you can't control yourself. What did you mean?" Jonas Miller's jaw tightened. For a moment, he stayed quiet. Then he spoke, his voice low. "In town years ago, a drunk came at me. He swung first. I should have stopped. But I didn't. Rage took me. I kept hitting. I killed him." The narrator explained that Jonas Miller was cast out after that night. Townsfolk saw not a man, but a beast. They feared his strength, his temper, and his silence. Jonas Miller walked into the mountains with nothing but the rifle and a blood-stained scarf from another lost life. Jonas Miller reached into his pack. He pulled out the scarf, stiff with old stains. He tossed it onto the table. "This reminds me what I am." Evelyn. Carter shivered. Her fingers moved to her own proof token. She opened her locket. Inside, the tiny picture of her mother stared back. She held it out toward the firelight. "This is what I carry. My mother's face. She's gone too." The narrator explained that Evelyn Carter's locket was her anchor. Where Jonas Miller carried reminders of violence, Evelyn Carter carried reminders of love. Two broken souls, sitting in the same cabin, bound by the tokens they refused to let go. Jonas Miller stared at the locket. His voice was rough. "You still have something worth remembering. All I keep is shame." Evelyn Carter met his eyes. "Maybe shame keeps you alive. My locket keeps me alive too." For a long time neither spoke. The fire popped, sparks rising. To the roof. Outside, the storm howled without pause. Jonas Miller finally lifted his head. His voice dropped lower. "This storm isn't ending soon, could be weeks before it clears." Evelyn Carter's chest tightened. The narrator explained the truth struck harder than the wolves and harder than the bandits. Escape was gone. The mountain had closed its grip. Evelyn Carter's locket felt heavier in her hand. Her voice was soft but steady. She whispered the words into the dark. "Then I'm trapped with you." The storm eased with the first light of day. Snow covered the cabin roof in a thick blanket. Evelyn Carter stepped outside with Jonas Miller. The cold cut her face, but the air was sharp and clear. The silver locket rested against her chest, the same proof token she had carried since the beginning. Jonas Miller dropped an axe in the snow. His scarred hands gripped the handle. He set a block of wood upright. "Watch close." The axe came down hard, splitting the log in two. Evelyn Carter flinched at the crack. Jonas Miller stepped back, handing her the axe. "Now you." Evelyn. Carter lifted the tool. The weight pulled at her arms. Her first swing missed, glancing off the wood. The axe nearly slipped. Jonas Miller's voice cut sharp. "Again." The narrator explained survival taught faster than comfort. The mountain did not allow weakness. Evelyn Carter swung again. The axe bit deep, splitting the log. Blisters formed on her hands, but her eyes stayed fixed. She lifted another piece. By midday, a small pile of split wood stood by the cabin wall. Evelyn Carter dropped the axe, sweat freezing on her face. Jonas Miller gave a small nod. "You're learning." Later, they walked into the trees. Jonas Miller showed her how to set snares. He bent branches, tied lines, and placed bait. Evelyn Carter watched, then copied. Her knots were clumsy at first, but soon tighter. Hours later, they returned. A rabbit struggled in the trap. Evelyn Carter's stomach twisted, but she held firm. Jonas Miller ended it quick with his knife. The narrator explained that Evelyn Carter, once a city woman, was changing. Each task stripped away weakness. Her locket still shone, but now it hung on a woman hardened by the mountain. Back inside the cabin, Jonas Miller sat by the fire. He cleaned his rifle, the old proof token that had carried him through exile. Beside him lay the blood-stained scarf, still folded. Both tokens reminded Jonas Miller of his past. Across from him, Evelyn Carter turned her locket in her hands, the tiny picture of her mother catching firelight. The narrator re-anchored. Rifle, scarf, locket, 3 tokens, 3 lives, bound by survival. Jonas Miller looked across the fire. His voice was steady. "You're not soft anymore." Evelyn Carter's lips curved, but not into a smile. She stared at the flames, fingers brushing the locket. The storm still raged outside, but inside she no longer felt only fear. The narrator explained that trust had begun to form. Not romance, but respect, the kind carved by hardship. Night pressed close again. The wind beat the walls, but the cabin stood. Evelyn Carter rose and walked to the small window. Snow stretched far beyond the trees, white and endless. She whispered, the words almost to herself. "Maybe the city doesn't need me back." The storm finally broke. Snow still lay heavy on the mountain, but the wind fell quiet. The sky opened in pale light. Evelyn Carter stepped outside the cabin, silver locket pressed in her palm. Jonas Miller followed, his scarred hands carrying the axe. The narrator reminded the journey. Storms had beaten them, wolves had clawed at the walls, and bandits had broken through the door. Fear had ruled the nights, but now dawn rose, and fear had turned into something else. Jonas Miller set a log upright. His arms swung, the axe split wood with a sharp crack. He worked calm, steady, each strike sure. The narrator explained that Jonas Miller, once a man trapped in rage, now looked like a man at peace. Evelyn Carter stood near the cabin wall. Her locket gleamed in the morning light. She rubbed the edges, remembering her mother's face, the E. Scarf lay folded inside the doorway. The bloodstains old but still dark. The rifle leaned by the hearth, metal polished from Jonas Miller's care. 3 proof tokens, locket, scarf, rifle, each recalled, each carrying the weight of survival. Jonas Miller looked toward Evelyn Carter. His voice was even. "You're stronger now. The mountain didn't break you." Evelyn Carter met his gaze. Her hands were blistered from work. Her body sore, but her stance was firm. The narrator explained survival had reshaped her. She was no longer only the city woman lost in the snow. She had split wood, set traps, faced hunger, and fought men. Who would have killed her? The silence of the mountain pressed around them. Evelyn Carter stepped forward. Her eyes scanned the horizon, endless snow, endless sky. "Maybe the city doesn't need me back," she whispered. The narrator reminded viewers that the city had once been Evelyn Carter's shield. Now the mountain had become her teacher. Fear and comfort had burned away. What remained was resolve. Jonas. Miller placed the axe in the snow. He walked to the cabin door, pausing. His scarred hand brushed the broken horseshoe nailed above the frame. The narrator recalled that token, Jonas's warning to trespassers, a sign of danger. Now it marked not only warning, but survival. Inside, the fire burned low. The rifle leaned against the wall. The scarf lay folded, tokens of pain, tokens of memory. Evelyn Carter's locket hung at her chest, brighter than them all. The narrator asked, "How far would you go to survive? Would you cling to fear, or let it change you?" Jonas Miller stood beside Evelyn Carter. Their shoulders brushed as they looked at the horizon together. No words were needed, but trust was clear. Not romance, not promise, just the bond carved. In hardship, snow glittered in the rising light. The cabin stood behind them, scarred but strong. Evelyn Carter lifted the locket, her thumb brushing the picture inside. Her voice was steady, clear. The locket gleamed in dawn's light as Evelyn whispered, "Jonas was worth trusting.